Jai Gange. My name is Rohan Maclaren from Parmarth Niketan Ashram. Today we've got the wonderful privilege to be interviewing Ganga Nandini ji here for a special interview for International Day of Yoga, and with the theme of this year's celebration being Women's Empowerment. Ganga Nandini looks after many of our humanitarian efforts at the ashram, and Nandini ji has been in Seva here for 14 years. So with a great pleasure, I introduce her. So Nandini ji, I think a lot of the audience that are here listening and are very interested about you and your story and how someone gets to this point where they're here at an ashram. And can you tell us some of the stories about like your early childhood? Was there a catalytic moment there that began this search, or this path that you're on?
Thank you, Rohan. I think first of all, let me just share, as Rohan mentioned, that I've been here at the ashram for 14 years. But originally I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I've been very privileged to have the opportunity to live here and to learn and to really be under the grace of Puja Swamiji, Puja Swami Chidanand Saraswati ji Maharaj, and Puja Sadhvi Bhagwati ji. But I think, you know, as you were saying, what was like my early childhood memories and maybe what has brought me here, I think. I can't say there was one catalytic moment. There was kind of a series or a chain of that kind of just built up and then had this, you know, like plateau of, you know, where I reached a point where I really kind of had this inner seeking so intense that it just drove me to the source of what I thought would be the solution to it all. And I think as a child, there were always these signs as a child that I can think back to, that I knew that I was more spiritually inclined, or there was, you know, something that I was more religious by nature or more spiritual by nature, and just like small things like, you know, forgetting to wear my shoes if I'm going to the park, or, you know, just being so comfortable with being barefoot, or when we would go to temples in the States, in Los Angeles, and I just remember just, you know, like watching with like so much like intrigue at just the dancers and the bhakti, or like listening when they were reading the Gita, and it was just always very interesting to me, even though I knew like others weren't necessarily so interested. As a child, it was always something that was just really, it just pulled me. And then I also remember, I think my family, especially my father, had always, you know, done yoga, and he's always inspired me to do yoga, and he was always forcing me to do yoga, and he registered me even into a yoga class, and he would try, you know, to do the best he could. He would do, you know, I remember on the weekends, he would have like big bowls and big water pitchers, and he would do like his whole Kriya ceremony with like the Gita playing in the background, and we would just be like, so weird, you know? But I think somewhere, वो लोग एक घर कर लेता है. It's kind of like the subconscious catalyst for things to come forward. And I think also what I was very much aware of is my sensitivity to other people's pain and suffering, including, of course, my own pain and suffering because of that. But I think I could feel people's angst and anxiety, and it put me in such a space that my inner seeking was really intense, because I would just wonder, like, is there another way of being? Is there another way of living in which we are more happy, we are more united, we are healthier, we are more in harmony? And I think that seeking and that question from my childhood led me into my adolescence, which was really the period of, you know, catalyzing that final decision of, I need to walk on this path of finding yoga, finding health.
So it seems that with your journey, there's a combination of both nature and nurture. And how have both of these elements interplayed to make this package of Nandini you? And I suppose some of the people who might be watching might be really interested when they're having children, for instance. and how do they give them that best opportunity to live a yogic life and a spiritual life?
It's very interesting that you bring that up, because I remember my father, he often says, and my mother also, so they both had very different stories of like when I was in the womb, what happened, or when, you know, like when I was not born, what was kind of the me coming into the world wala piece. And my father, he did a lot of yoga asana. Like there are pictures of him back then, like black and white pictures of him in every single asana pose, and he was super flexible. And he was like that was his sadhana. Even in the States, he really practiced yoga. So I imagine that must also play a really strong part into this really like seed of yoga. My mother also, funny, she says that she used to chant a lot of Shiva mantras and like pray to Shiva and pray to the sun and, you know, worship the sun when I was in her womb. And I feel like those early imprints really catalyze the seed in this child. You know what I mean? Like it not every child, of course. I mean, I have 7 siblings, and it could be that they practiced with them also, but that seed of, you know, that direction in their life wasn't there. And yet here was a seed which was being given this water of their own practices. And then when it came out into the world, there was this like period in which it just experienced, felt, and then felt like, is there another way of being? And had this journey. So yes, I absolutely think there was this beautiful harmony of nature and nurture that gave rise to the vessel, the instrument that is here now.
Oh, amazing. And I also wonder, like, as you were growing up, and do you have anything you'd like to share from your early adolescent years? Any challenges as well that may have sculpted this path?
I think a lot of my like feelings of other people's pain and suffering catalyze, especially I think I remember my grandfather passing away. He was in India. And I remember like me being in the States and just praying, like, please God, whatever he has, don't like allow him not to suffer, and allow me to, you know, take over whatever he has. And I remember just praying so intensely, like, God, you know, I would always like dream of like God like putting this shield around, you know, the home or the world, or, you know, like this thing. So I prayed, I was like, please don't like cause too much suffering to my grandfather, and whatever he's got, please just allow me to help him in this period. And it was so weird, because just after that, a little while later, of course, I think I also had a lot of stress in my family, like just a lot of triggers. And I think it's true for a lot of people, especially in the States. But it's true now everywhere, is that, you know, parents are the best they can be, but they're not perfect. And they bring in their own packages, and they bring in their own sanskaras, and they then, you know, catalyze and influence the journey of their children as well. And, you know, I think there were many periods in which I myself was very sensitive, and I didn't know how to give direction to my sensitivity. And I think both of those things of having that made me have this period in my adolescence where I would have really high fevers. I would have immense swelling in my joints. And there was a period, like I think 10, 12 days where I was hospitalized. And I swear, I thought I was going to die based off of what everybody else was like, how they were treating me. And I just felt so bad. I felt like I'm so inconveniencing my parents. And I was just trying to calm everybody down. I was like, it's going to be okay, even though it was me who was being diagnosed. But it turned out that I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder. And it was very interesting because actually I didn't know that an autoimmune disorder like lupus even existed. I mean, we hear about cancer, we hear about all these other diseases, but we never hear about like this whole spectrum of autoimmune disorders. At least I didn't. And I was just wondering, like, what is this? Why are there diseases that doctors don't actually know why they happen, and they don't know how to treat it? And so I remember after I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis initially because of all the swelling. And then they did an ANA test, and then they said, okay, my ANA levels are high, and then they diagnosed it as lupus. But it was kind of like an umbrella term for what looked like lupus. And then it just was like the doctor basically told me, don't take on things that will stress you, don't take on things that will cause, exertion of yourself, and, like things like that. And I was a very ambitious young woman. Like for me, and I think it's true for most Indian families, and again, I am sort of quoting on behalf of all Indian families, but there is a really strong pillar of education in Indian families, and my parents also included, really put an emphasis on education. For me, I felt education was my key to a happier life, to a healthier life, to a more independent life. And so I was so focused on education that when this hit, and because of my health issues, I was not able to appear in my examinations or to go to school or miss school. Like missing school was like the end of the world for me. And so I think it was really, that point for me was so important for me to realize there is nothing more important than our health. And that shifted my perspective in life completely. And I think there are moments in my life, and I think there are moments in many people's life, where extensive pain and suffering, and I've come to this period after my practice of yoga, is realizing that pain and suffering are our greatest gurus, they're our greatest teachers, and they catalyze our journey of growth and self-discovery in ways that nothing else could. And I think that journey when I was diagnosed with autoimmune disorder and then had to really focus on my health and my well-being has shaped and intensified my inner longing to find a solution to living a life of health and wellness.
And so for those people who might be also struggling with different health issues and maybe looking for answers, how did that journey unfold in terms of you searching for answers, searching for an end for this suffering, searching for better health and wellness in a holistic way of being? How did you overcome this issue?
So my search was initially that I thought, okay, the solution is I'm going to go to med school and I will become a doctor, and then I will be able to, solve this for other people. And then I realized when I was going through the autoimmune disorders and I was meeting with the doctors, that actually doctors don't really, at least this was my perspective, that they didn't have all the answers. And that there were many things about a disease that we still don't have answers for in a traditionally allopathic way of medicine. And it really disenchanted me that here I was thinking about going into med school, And then thinking, oh my God, if I go into med school, I'm going to have so many hours of work, put my body through so much stress, and then have to like have shifts, you know, in the morning, in the night, where I'm just like on coffee and like trying to get through the rest of the day. And I knew physically my body would not be able to do it. And I also realized that doctors at the end of the day didn't. For me, I thought like if you go to the doctor, you know, my mindset was they should have the solution to why you're ill. And when I came across autoimmune disorder, I was like, actually, they don't have all the answers. So when I started asking for what's the solution, I came upon this understanding that there wasn't just a physiological impact of a disease. There was a behavioral impact of the disease. And that led me really to ask, where do I go to learn about the anatomy and the physiology, the biology, but also understand the psychology and the psychosomatic nature of a disease. And at that time, there weren't majors that I could do that would be able to give me both of those elements. And then I remember looking at UCLA and UC Berkeley and seeing like, okay, maybe there could be microbiology, maybe there could be psychobiology was a new major that had come out in UCLA at that time. And then I was thinking, well, I don't necessarily want to be in Los Angeles. I want to be, you know, I want to explore and be at UC Berkeley when I got in. I remember I went to high school, and then after high school, I ended up, you know, not getting into UCLA, and my father was like, he really wanted me to go to UCLA, and that didn't happen. And so then I ended up working for 2-3 years, part-time work, full-time community college, put myself through school, even though I graduated from what was like a magnet school. Like this was a very special high school that I graduated. Graduating class was like 50 people, and it was like the cream of the crop of, so, you know, these were like the most studious or the most like ambitious young children. But when I graduated and I went to community college and I worked, that was so, even though I didn't like it at all, I was so rebellious at that time. I was so angry about that decision. But what shaped me was actually to work. This is the situation I have in front of me. How can I make it the best I can? And also be able to create and co-create my own future. And then I remember going from there and getting a scholarship into UC Berkeley, and I was like, basically I'm flying in the sky and the possibilities are unlimited. And when I went to UC Berkeley, I was still trying to figure out what is my major? And I didn't find anything. I even explored the option of creating my own major. But then with that, it's like that doesn't have necessarily a reputation that existing majors have that have been going on for so many years. So then I ended up doing a double major in psychology and biology. And yet still, after doing that, I felt like there was really something that wasn't being answered. And that was the time, I think, when I really dealt, stress was very difficult for me. And I think stress was an important trigger in my life. And when I was walking down, I remember UC Berkeley, there's a walkway down to the big campus, and I saw this sign. It says, do you want happiness? Do you want peace? Do you want harmony? And I just walked back. I'm like, yes, I do. And it was a Art of Living club that has the student club there was. And I went to that Wednesdays. I was a little late. I remember the teacher like looked at me like, you're late. And I sat down and they had the session of meditation. It was very special. But then they registered me for the first happiness course, and I had no idea what I was signing up for. And I ended up taking the course, and I did Sudarshan Kriya. And I remember the first time I did Sudarshan Kriya, I was crying, tears down my eyes, like I was in my mother's womb, and I was just crying and crying and crying. And the next day, the teacher says, we're going to do Sudarshan Kriya again. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do this again. It was very painful. And he said so beautifully, he said, if I tell you the same joke twice, will you laugh at it the same way? And I said, no. And he said, why is it that then a trigger of pain is the same way for you? And that really stuck for me. And I said, okay, I will try it. And I did it again. And it felt like this practice lifted so much off of me that allowed me to be who I was, and to be able to be comfortable and happy to be in the space of security to explore.
So it sounds like that you, at university, you found yoga in a way,
Yeah.
and had some pretty powerful experiences that changed your perspective. How did this then lead you to finding Parmarth Niketan, and what made you make the decision to come and live here?
So the quest for the health and wellness was always on. Then I found this Sudarshan Kriya and art of living in this community, and I started doing a lot more seva. I went to, they just opened the first Art of Living Center in Los Angeles, and I went to it was a cathedral basically that got renovated in Rishikesh Center.
Could you say how that connected to the service? So you started having these experiences, and then
I just got more into the community there.
Okay.
And so I just connected more and more with the community, and then that community then...
Start from there? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think then after having this experience, I felt like I found a family, and I found friends that I could relate to and that I could be myself with. And slowly, I started exploring other activities that we did together. And one of the activities was the center that was opening up, and Puja Gurudev was coming out to do a session on the Upanishads. And it was very, like, for me as a college student, like, it was like, I think 1,100 some seats, and each of the seats were $1,100. And it was, at that time, I was like, how am I going to afford this? And yet, the teacher just said, set the intention and it will happen. And I was like, fine, I will set the intention. And I did it. And somehow I took out a loan and did it and went. And I remember, like, meeting the guru and having just this experience. Like, the first time that Gurudev came out, he had a bag of Lays in his hand, and it just kind of like floating around in the room. And of course, me being from the States, I've never seen a master or a guru. I don't even know what this means, right? So this was the first time I'm listening to wisdom of the Upanishad. And it was just, I remember the bag of Lays, and then him coming out, and then that Lays became prasad, and it started going all the way around the table. But it was just, for me, because I loved junk food. And so I was like, that's so cool. Here's the saint, and he has this experience. And so he was very relatable. And so after these 2-3 days of the Upanishads, he actually had this time where we all got to meet him. And I was always, as I mentioned, very like, I wanted to do projects. I had this, like, I was in this body positive group, and I was doing work with women with bulimia and anorexia and body image. And I had this idea of doing something together with Art of Living, and I made a proposal for it, and I binded it. And I'm here in this line of like 1,000 people waiting to meet Guruji. And of course, it's just like 1 second meets, right? And I did not know like what it is like to meet, a saint, and that's just like 1 second. But I was thinking I would actually have a chance to tell him about this project and this proposal. So I go in, I'm on this line, and I get up to him. And of course it was like, you bow your head, you give what he's giving, and they get it, and they put it in the basket behind him, and that's it. And I was like, I didn't get to say anything. And he just like touched your head, and you're out the door, right? But his touch, I I remember leaving the room thinking, oh my God, what a big ego I had. Thinking I would have like a meeting with Gurudev. And I had all these ideas and all these plans, and in this moment he touches me, and that touch, he didn't say anything. There was no exchange of words, and I don't know how to describe it. I left out of there knowing something has changed forever. And I remember and sitting in the lectures, and there were two moments that I vividly remember. One was everybody gets to thank him, and I raised my hand and I was like, "Thank you, Guruji. Sudarshan Kriya has changed my life forever." Blah blah blah. I started speaking, and then he looks at me, and I just realized I don't need to say anything. He knows it already. And it was just this moment of just silence, absolute just silence. And then there was a second moment of just the bhajans and the kirtans that are associated with the satsangs. And I remember sitting outside of the steps, and I had my black shawl over my head. And of course, this is not and I didn't regularly attend a satsang. And here I am, with this shawl over my head, sitting on the soil with the sun on my face, and I'm just singing Jai Jai Radha Raman Hari Bol. And there are so many moments now when I sit on the banks of Ganga, and I think I was right there. I was there in that moment, and the wisdom of my spirit knew where I needed to be. And I think it really shifted a lot of things. I started doing a lot of seva more. I started getting more involved in the groups, and I would go and I would, make the community meals, and I would just be so exuberantly happy. Even giving a spoon to someone. I was just so exuberantly happy with this seva. And this concept of seva, of actually doing something in which your energy is not expended, or you're not exhausted by it. In fact, you feel, even though the body needs rest, you feel energized by it. That concept was just I want to do that. I want to be there. And I think that quest of being more yogic, being more spiritual, doing more seva, allowed me to let go of the idea that I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to go to med school, I'm going to go to Harvard, and be maybe there's some other plan for me. And I'm okay, willing to explore that, and I'm willing to go to India for a break, for a vacation, and to see what that means, and to meet with my roots, and to meet with my mother, whom I hadn't seen for 10, 12 years.
I think you've touched on something really, really beautiful and profound for people, is how that touch of the divine, whether or not it's in Sangha, in spiritual community, in a meditation group, seeing a saint or a spiritual teacher, how that touch can really shape or change our perspective, and how important it is for people to experience that.
I think this also reminds me a lot of what Puja Swamiji says, when my guru now, Puja Swamiji Chidanand Saraswati Ji, says his guru touched him on the third eye, and it was just this divine touch. It's not just the teachings, the touch. And I really resonate with that, because it's true. When you embody that wisdom, when you embody that energy, then you are a channel of that teaching's transformative effect, which makes it the touch that transforms so many lives.
It's very beautiful. So you've come to India and then arrived obviously in Parmarth Niketan. So what led you to come to this ashram specifically, and what made you want to stay? Stay for 14 years, by the way, and counting.
I didn't actually plan to come to Parmarth Niketan. I had no idea about what Parmarth Niketan existed on the world map. I probably had no idea where Rishikesh existed on the world map, or Uttarakhand for that matter. I came with the intention of, here's a tradition, or here's a practice that has transformed my life, And the origins of this practice is in this country. And my mother resides in this country. And before I go on to do the next thing, whether it's master's or MD or whatever else I decide to do, let me take a break and go visit my roots. That was the only intention. It was no intention of anything else. And so I came to India and went to my mother and very quickly realized that there's not very much I could shift or do to make situation better for her. But it really brought me into a place, can I become a stronger person to help her? And that allowed me to explore more of India and explore more of, I did more courses with the Art of Living. And then I ended up going to the Art of Living Center for Navratri. And I remember during the Navratri retreat, Gurudev was in silence, and there was a saint by the name of Pujya Swami Pragyananji Maharaj, and he was giving discourses on the Gita, and that was only like 30-minute discourses, and I don't remember anything else he said, but I remember this one story he shared. And Swami Pragyananji said so beautifully at that time, he says, even if God were to manifest and come in front of you and give you what you wanted, you don't know how to ask and what to ask. And he said, that is why you need to either have that vision in which you can see the world as your family, or at least be guided by someone with that vision. And in my thinking in that satsang hall with lakhs of people, there's this intention of, God, I know my vision is not clear, but please grant me someone who has the vision, who sees the world as one family, and allow me just to hold on to his cloth and just walk with him wherever, him or her, wherever, so that I am able to walk in that direction of that vision. And then just intention came, the first saint who will ask me for anything, I will happily do the needful. And of course I was waiting, Gurudev would ask for me to stay back in the ashram, and that didn't happen. And after that I got swept from the Bangalore ashram to this Ganga Yatra, because my father was going on this Ganga Yatra from Delhi to Gangotri on the upper Ganga region. And he says, you're interested in yoga and meditation, and, yoga and meditation has taken birth on the banks of Ganga, and you need to go here. And he had a good friend who was in the National Ganga River Basin Authority. And she, Rama Rautaji, said, we need more young women who will, speak about these issues and speak about protecting our rivers and our nature. And, we need more educated young women, and you should come with us. I said, fine, I'm here for, a few months, and I'm willing to go on this yatra. And I came on this yatra.
Yeah, okay. So then that led you obviously to Parmarth Niketan.
I did,
You get to the banks of Ganga. You're at the ashram for, I guess, a week or so. And what actually led you, what catalyzed your decision to actually stay and remain? What happened then?
I remember coming from Delhi. When we were on this, we stopped in Haridwar. We came to Rishikesh, and it was late at night. So we parked the car and we came in, and Aarti had begun already. So we were sitting in the back of the Aarti. And I just remember hearing Pujya Swamiji's voice in the Aarti, singing the Aarti. And I just remember, because again, when you're receptive, when you've become receptive, you've become even more like able to experience a much deeper experience of life itself. And so when he sang, there was this bhav, there was this feeling sense in me that I could actually be here. If somebody asked me to stay, this, there was this like this, this like I've come home, and why this is for me as a young Indian woman from the States who at the age of 18 or so left their home and then went to college and then was from one place to another, from one rented leased place to another rented leased place, and to have this space of actually this feels like home. And just a sense of, and then of course Puja Swamiji, we had an opportunity to meet with him. He led a workshop here, and it seemed out of all of the people that I had heard along this yatra, he made the most sense. And I was very impressed. And then I came into his jhopri the night with the rest of our team. And then he said, you know what, cleaning up Ganga is not a weekend business. It's not like Saturday, Sunday, you do a workshop and then you leave and Ganga is clean. He says, you have to dedicate your life for this. And I didn't, of course, understand the full gravity of what he was saying. But he said, who would like to stay back and serve for this cause? And of course, I didn't know stay back meant like lifetime stay back. But I was like, this is a fun, thing I could provide my, whatever education I have, I could provide this for another month or so that I'm here in India. And so I raised my hand out of like 25 of us. And of course, Puja Swamiji like solidified it and, gave it that royal touch in the arti. And he says, this young woman has come from the States and has dedicated her life and he puts this shawl over me. And I remember I was trying to avoid this situation way in the crowd in the left side. And of course, he calls my name and he says, he honors me with this, the Jai Jai Radha Raman, the Jai Ganga shawl. And I was like, okay, it's been solidified. Like, I can't escape this anymore.
I find that really beautiful, that you came with this openness of the heart, this willingness to say yes. And from that first day you arrived, you just kept saying yes. And that yes has now continued 14 years. It also makes you reflect really beautifully about like with that openness of the heart. They say that first comes Atma Kripa, the listening to the heart. And Atma Kripa takes you to the Guru. And through the Guru, you get Guru Kripa, Guru's grace. And through Guru's grace, you get to know Ishvara Kripa, the grace of God. And it sees that from the very start of landing in the land of India, that openness led you to this.
But I would like to also say, though, that I think it's really important. I think there is a period in your life where you get the Guru's grace, and saying yes to everything and being so open actually has a little bit of a caution associated with it. So I said yes to everything, like all of the seva, and took on everything. And it actually, to the extent of forgetting to eat, forgetting to drink water, forgetting to take care of the body, and like just, said just yes to everything, just like threw myself into seva. And I think what I learned from the pandemic, where I fell sick again, and that was that 14-day quarantine period, was like, here I am on the other side of the world, again with this sickness, with this illness. And even though physically my body is stronger and healthier now, my mental state isn't quite as strong as I would like it to be. And that's what catalyzed me to say I might be teaching and instructing yoga asana courses, which I was doing at the time for a saint here, but I don't really understand the mechanics of the mind that I brought even into this very spiritual, very sacred space. Because even though it looks like I am spiritual being wearing white, living this life of seva, actually there are practices and things that I was doing that was harming my body, thinking I was doing it for the common good. And I think when I took my yoga teacher's training, I really had a period in that YTTC while I was doing seva 5-6 hours, doing the YTTC 5-6 hours. I literally came to a place having an intense shingles breakout, diarrhea, my periods came, and like I fainted, and it was Puja Swamiji and Sadhuji were not here at the time. And so I think that period of actual breaking down, where I realized something has to change at a very core level, and yoga is the answer. And not yoga as in postures, but as in the holistic science of asanas, philosophy, balanced state of life. And this whole practice needs to be my lifetime journey. Like, I must give up whatever I must give up to walk this path, because that is really the answer to being and leading a holistic, healthy, balanced, harmonious life.
And you mentioned of the blessing that it is of coming and being in a space where you can hold on to the robes of someone who is realized or has a great level of consciousness or connection to love or divine spirit. How has being able to be in such a fortunate position of having a guru, which most people spend their whole lives searching for, hoping for,
don't even know exist? I feel like most people in the States have no idea what a guru is. Like, I had no idea what a guru is.
Right. And so how has it been being in such great proximity of both Pujya Swamiji, Pujya Swami Chidananda Saraswati, and Pujya Sattvi Bhagavati Saraswati? How has been with both of them shaped your life? And maybe this impact has been different between the two of them as well.
I think in a nutshell, I feel that they've really embodied a lot of the practices. Like, I remember, going and reading through the yoga philosophy, and there were concepts in there that most of us didn't understand, and yet I would just reflect and I would say, I've seen this in Pujya Swamiji, or I've seen this in Sadhviji, or I've experienced this in Arti. And even though I was not coming from a background of having practiced, like actually learned and understood the discipline, I think the felt sense experience of being in the presence of people who are living spirituality, it allows you to be more influenced and impacted. And for me, it was like 10, 12 years of having walked on the path and having served these enlightened masters, and then coming to this wisdom and being like, where have you been all my life? Had I learned this? And yet that was my journey. Like, it needed to happen that way, because when I came across, like, there's a concept called Chitta Prasadanam, and I had no idea what that meant, and they explained it to me as this like pleasant state of the chitta, of this like pure, serene, beautiful state. And I was like, you know what, I kind of experienced that in the Arti. And even though I don't even know like what that might mean exactly, there were these moments that where I reflect on actually these 12, 13 years that I'd spent in Pujya Swamiji and Sadhviji's seva made me more able to receive. And in yoga tradition, we call it an adhikari. You become someone who is able to receive. And I became an adhikari just being in their presence and seeing from their example, and having felt this sense of oneness and family with them and their mission. And even though when they were speaking about householders, and I remember just saying, like, I feel like part of this family, this ashram family. And so I was very thankful for having them in my life, because it allowed me to be more receptive of this wisdom and of understanding this concept of yoga.
So let me know, what does International Day of Yoga mean to you? I think this year specifically the theme is women's empowerment. And how does that confluence between yoga and women's empowerment mean for you? What does that bring up?
I think the International Day of Yoga is really a day to raise awareness on the powerful impact and the powerful potential that the science and the practice and the art of yoga has on the global community. To do yoga, but in yoga, in that united together, we are together for health and wellness, and we are together for finding viable solutions to creating a more sustainable world, because that's what a path of living a yogic life will lead to. That's a natural byproduct of living a yogic life, is sustainability and health and harmony. And so I think that's what Yoga Day means to me. And I love that this theme of this year is yoga for women's empowerment, because it's actually for everyone's empowerment. But for the social identities that we get born into, or we get acculturated, or we are told, you are a woman and therefore these things, you can do or you can't do, or these are, the stigmas associated with it, or these are, sort of the social practices associated with it. And somehow in your mind, you feel limited by this body. And yet you have this practice of yoga that allows you to realize that you are beyond the body, and yet you do have a body that you have to take care of. And so I think both of those things are really beautiful. And when we celebrate yoga for women's empowerment, we do allow ourselves to say, yes, we are beyond the body and we are the spirit. But we also say, okay, but we have that experience of that consciousness in this body form. And this body form as a woman goes through hormonal cycles, and this body form as a woman has the tendency to have periods where she cannot, when we are on our menstrual cycle, there are periods we don't necessarily have the ability to do physical postures, and those are days that we kind of have to take rest, and that our bodies are synced to the natural cycle of nature, and how inevitably we must listen and attune ourselves to this physical body, and that beautiful coming together of Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha being that consciousness. Yes, we are that consciousness. And yet that consciousness, when it touches upon Prakriti, when it touches upon nature, is what is the expression of our world and our experiences. And so it's really beautiful that here we are, this tradition of yoga being given by Adiyogi, being given by Shiva, and his first disciple being his wife, being Parvati. And I love that. I love that Lord Shiva is such a beautiful example of women empowerment. And I love how Ma Parvati is that beautiful example of divine Shakti, who says, no, yoga is not only for the sages and the saints in Kailash Mansarovar, yoga is for all. And she then gives it to the Sapta Rishis, and then they codify it, and Sage Maharishi Patanjali codifies it and gives it to the world. And that idea of yoga for all really is the potential and the gift that Yoga Day invites us all into. And so I'm very excited for Yoga Day every year, but particularly for this year, because this year also the beautiful thing is, this year we had Shivratri and we had Women's Day on the same day. And then we celebrated Adi Guru Shankaracharya Ji's Jayanti and Mother's Day on the same day.
And at that Women's Vocational Training Center, there's, am I right to say that there's some yoga offerings that happen there? How does that ethos of training women and girls in yoga fit into that holistic self-development that this center stands for?
Yes, you're right, very much so. We do a lot of so the center is a school in the daytime, and then it's a vocational training center in the evening. One of the most popular offerings of the evening is the yoga, especially because we are in Rishikesh, which is the yoga capital of the world. One of the most popular options for getting a job is as a yoga teacher or as a yoga instructor, and so we're really working with young girls to be yoga teachers and to be yoga instructors, because not only in that process do they get to take care of themselves, but they get to take care of the society, and they get to take care of their communities at large. And I think for me personally, it's been really beautiful to see how, and I think world over, you see a lot of women, particularly in areas of education and healthcare in general, but in yoga also there's an incredible majority of women, because it's innately something that comes very naturally to women, to take care of health and to be ensuring wellness in their societies. And really rewarding for us to see how we're providing those opportunities to young girls and women, not only in the center, but also through our courses and through our offerings at the ashram. They're available and open to everyone, but particularly what we've seen is a majority of the women and a majority of the people who come are women. And so it's really great that to be able to provide something that not only is nourishing for oneself, but is nourishing for the community at large.
Great, wonderful. So, as you're looking towards that self-development and people making the most out of their lives, which has been happening at the centres that we offer. Sorry, I'll start again. So, further to that, I would be interested to know from you what advice you would give to someone who's considering going on a similar journey of self-development, of seva that you followed on. Are there any learnings or lessons or things that you would want to offer them to inspire them, understanding that these journeys can be quite challenging? It's obviously a long journey. What advice would you offer?
Many people start walking on the path of yoga for many different reasons. And sometimes it could be something as simple as I want to have a fitter body, or I want to lose some weight, or I would like to have more stamina or more physical fitness. And that's okay. And I think what I've realized over this journey is if you've approached yoga with that intention, inevitably, if you're really doing yoga, if you're really doing asana with a teacher who is able to bring you to a space in which you are really mindful of that practice, it will take you where it needs to. And I think that, like, for us as yoga teachers, and this is for all yoga teachers, it's our job to be the authentic embodiment of what yoga really is, and to offer whatever we offer with the awareness that all we need to do is bring people under the shade of yoga. What that shade means to each individual is individually their journey, and it is their relationship with yoga, that seed of yoga within them that will flourish and thrive and blossom in its own unique ways for each person. And so for each of us as teachers, it's literally just sharing what we've experienced and allowing people to come close and build a relationship with yoga, and just being facilitators and bridges, because yoga inevitably is so powerful and it's such a beautiful magnet that if you are actually going into it and you're being taught by an instructor who is really aligned, no matter whether they're doing just the asana practice, they will inevitably bring you into understandings that will lead you into a deeper sense of alignment, harmony, balance within yourself. And I've also realized that even though we say yoga is beyond asana, and I know that in today's world we see yoga as synonymous with asana, synonymous with physical postures. Yes, asana is a very critical, very crucial part of yoga, especially in today's day and age. But it cannot be taken as a standalone. And together, it's like, when you have haldi or when you have turmeric, we see a lot in the West, we're trying to kind of isolate the particular enzyme in the turmeric that gives it its property. And you realize that that particular isolation isn't as potent as when it's naturally present with all of the other ingredients that are naturally there in nature. And I think that's what yoga also offers us, is that yoga philosophy, that asana, that balanced living, that abhyas, that vairagya, all of that coming together in this very synergistically potent, powerful tool of transformation, of inner transformation. And that as instructors, it is our responsibility to be able to not only embody that in our practice, but to be able to share our love for it and allow people to have their own personal experiences and their own personal journeys on this path of yoga.
Yeah, I really love that. I love how it seems that you're getting at is that yoga meets the people wherever they are, or you meet yoga wherever you're at.
Exactly.
And that's
And it's perfect. And it's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that you have to understand everything. Everybody's journey is totally different, and it's totally perfect whenever they get into it. yoga is this beautiful river. It's like Maa Ganga. It's like it doesn't matter from what space you go into it. It matters you just get in and you have that experience of wetness that lasts so much deeper than just the few seconds that you're in a yoga practice, in 90 minutes or 60 minutes on a mat.
Beautiful.
But it changes you forever.
Beautiful. Is there anything specific you'd like to share about the Indian Yoga Association?
The Indian Yoga Association is an incredible initiative that is a beautiful coming together of yoga institutions across India and yoga centers across India, people who really are working to protect the authentic roots and traditions of yoga. And because India is really the origin, you cannot have an understanding of yoga without an understanding of the culture from which it has originated. And the Indian Yoga Association is that very active pursuit of understanding yoga within the cultural context of India, the land from which it has originated. And it's beautiful to see so many institutions coming together to really speak about what is yoga and therefore what is not yoga, especially in a world where, everything and anything is being hashtag yoga, and it's not necessarily yoga. And so it's really important to have that. And it's also really beautiful to see that even though in a country, in a land that is so rich with so many diverse traditions of yoga, very different also traditions of yoga, for them to come together and say, you know what, these are some standard practices that will help people at large understand and navigate the world of yoga in an easier way, and to be able to really facilitate that journey, and to say that even though we might be different in our approach to yoga, we are together in our pursuit of yoga. And that's what's so beautiful about the Indian Yoga Association. And it's available now. We are, not only does it have a national chapter, but we have so many different state chapters, and it doesn't matter where you are. It's not only state chapters, we also have, if you're in different countries also, you are able to join the Indian Yoga Association of people who are really dedicated to protecting the roots and the tradition of yoga.
Wonderful. Well, Nandini ji, thank you so much for sharing your time. It's been us a joy. Is there anything else you'd like to share in final? Anything from your heart, any prayer, anything to inspire people? Any last words?
I think as Biju Swamiji says so beautifully, he says, Yog karo, roz karo, aur moj karo. He says, do yoga, be yoga, live yoga, learn yoga, and love yoga. And I think that's really beautiful. And last thing he says that really sticks to me is yoga is not just what you do, it's who you are. And it's really important that on the path of yoga you realize that yes, the doing helps us in the undoing, but the process of the undoing is to get to a state of just being. And that beingness is actually that yoga, that union that we want to achieve in our lives. So I hope that no matter who you are, where you are, whether it's just the yoga day or beyond yoga day, yoga becomes a part of your every day and every moment. And you dive deeper and deeper into understanding yoga, which has been a lifetime journey for me and hopefully for you as well. Jai Ganga.